So if this is your first time hearing about Rent2Rent Social Housing, this is what this video is going to be about, very top level on what it's about, how you get into it and how you go about it. So first off, Dan, how do people connect with local authorities or private limited companies which are a supported living company?
Yeah, so obviously two different ways to go about that. If they are like a private limited company, then oftentimes there's a few different ways. So if they're like adult supported living, you could look on the CQC register. If they are Ofsted, they provide children's support, then you can look at on the government website Ofsted reports, and that's a good way of finding companies that way as well. But a lot of Google keywords, specifically around the type of provider that you're looking for and who they care for. So that could be like 16 to 18 year olds. Obviously there's homelessness support, there's drug addiction support, anything that you can think of where the people that would be living in the property receive some sort of care. You can Google those words and in your area and basically just finding providers that way. There's also on the government website, you go to like contract finders to see who has won recent tenders and things like that. The other thing to obviously find local authorities is basically just look in your radius. I would go to your local council first and then just work your way out. But what you're looking for there is to speak with somebody in the housing department or like homelessness support, and you don't want to just be ringing up the council. You want to go through to the right department, at least initially.
Then obviously when you onboard a provider, what would they be looking for? Why would they want to work with us?
Because you're solving a problem ultimately, and that's how you're going to approach them. That's how you're going to position yourself, is that you are there offering them a solution and you're not trying to sell them anything. First you're seeing if they're a right fit for what it is that you're offering and if you can help them. So you position yourself as a way of trying to grow together if there's a relationship to be had. So it's more out of curiosity. When we're initially reaching out, we're just essentially telling them what we're proposing, in that we are in communications with a lot of landlords, agents and everything like that. Remember, we're property experts and we are trying to save them the time and agony of finding the right properties for their services. Oftentimes, unless they're a much larger organisation, like the directors themselves or higher up management are actually going to be the ones looking for properties, and that's not a great use of their time, right? Because they've got care, they've got all the other they've got the teams to manage, the carers to manage, they've got all that sort of stuff going on. They don't want to sit down a member of staff to go through Rightmove, Open Rent, building relationships with agents and stuff like that. That's where you come in and essentially you can offer that service directly to them.
100%. They're focusing on scaling their supported living business.
Yeah.
As opposed to hiring a member of staff to do what you do full time at 30,000, 40,000 a year.
Yeah.
You just knock on their door, like, I can do that for you.
Yeah, and we recently actually had mentee John. Yeah, so basically John has been a provider that he was onboarding and speaking to over a period of time, has basically approached him to say, we would like you to do 10 hours a week on outreach for us, building relationships with agents and landlords on our behalf to secure us properties, because they need, I think, an additional like 15 bed spaces. So they actually wanted to get him on board to provide this service that we're doing as a business anyway. Yeah. So it's I've never come across that, to be honest.
Yeah, cool.
But
John's, the amount of work he's put in.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I always say that if you're consistent with your business, you build trust with the audience.
Yeah.
If you're not consistent, then why would anybody trust you with their business?
Yeah.
So obviously he's proved himself to that business that I'm someone to be taken seriously.
100%.
It's not too dissimilar, but let's just walk through the compliance compared to HMO to social housing, the key differences.
Yeah, it's going to be exactly the same as a normal rent-to-rent business. So you're going to need your PRS, your ICO, you're going to want public liability, professional indemnity. If you're going into the realms of like doing management, which is a strategy that we cover as well, which is a great strategy, then you might be looking at like client money protection accounts, these sorts of things, depending on whether you're collecting the rent on the landlord's behalf, managing that sort of stuff. But pretty straightforward and very much similar to the stuff that you have in place for HMO or for service accommodation anyway.
So I know amongst the students, the contracts vary drastically, don't they? Depending on the deal. What is the most simple contract look like between one of our students and a provider with a landlord, like a back-to-back lease? So
it's not so much the contract itself, it's just it's kind of making sure that it aligns on both sides, right? So there's contract templates within the pack that we give to the mentees, but oftentimes, like, depending on what type of provider you're working with, they issue their own contract anyway. So then it's a case of working with that. Some will be very strict, and that's the contract that we use, and we don't amend it, and then you have to factor that in with your contract with the landlord, right? Sometimes you'll get a bit more of a blank canvas, but you want to be using like a commercial lease in most cases, anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Sometimes you can use a company let if it's shorter, but you don't want to be using anything that's over 3 years. You don't really want to be using a company let for. You want to be looking at a proper lease then.
Would you say it's very important to use the right contract?
100%.
Did you see a comment on one of our videos the other day? But it basically said like he went at this alone, thinking they could do this alone.
Yeah.
Got all the way through to signing contracts and then pulled out, and it would have profited, or so the person assumes, 400 a month passively for the duration of the contract, and then they pulled out.
Yeah.
You know, it just, you don't know what you don't know.
No.
I speak to a lot of people, a lot of you guys, and you say you're going to give this a go yourselves. No one ever succeeds on your own. You know, you might take on a property, you'll be handing it back 6 months later. You don't know what you don't know, and that comment just proved it.
Yeah.
It's like that is well done for admitting it. Publicly on YouTube. Credit. Yeah, it's a dangerous game to play with, isn't it? You got to take yourself seriously. You're dealing with businesses, landlords' assets.
Yeah.
You can't guess.
No, definitely not. And I think it's always worth, in certain deals, if you're not sure, then getting legal advice right on contracts. Like, there's nothing wrong with getting a solicitor to overview a contract on your behalf. Or if, you know, you're dealing with a big deal, getting a solicitor to draw up the contracts. That's, you know, if you're going to be making over £1,000 a month on a deal, what's £2,000 to get some leases drawn up either side, right? It's not, it's short-term pain for long-term gain.
That's it. Or skip that and just join a mentorship training program, and they should provide, and we provide our mentees with the contracts. We have contracts and templates that our mentees have access to. What does a typical income look like for structuring a social housing deal? I mean, it can be exceptional, which we'll talk about in a minute, but a standard one.
Standard, I think. So I was having a Zoom call with the guys the other day, the mentees, on our weekly Zoom, and I was saying how I always push for like £500 to £600 as a minimum on your back-to-back leasing, but then it did sort of raise the question of like, it depends on the provider, right? It depends on if they're well established. It's like with a landlord, let's use a landlord. If they're a portfolio landlord, you might be willing to take on a deal for a little bit less profit to know that there's plenty of future
opportunity.
Business.
I've done that and it paid off massively.
100%. We've done it. So it's like the same applies for the provider. If you can get, you know, a reasonable margin, they're well established, you know, you've seen that they've got good ratings, whether that's CQC, whether that's Ofsted, maybe you've seen some examples of their properties, maybe you've even been to some of their properties. We do that quite often through the due diligence process, and you feel comfortable working with them and there's a long-term relationship, then it doesn't need to be as high. You don't need to stretch it so much. I mean, like even on a management deal, you could probably make like 300 at least. So I wouldn't go that low for a back-to-back lease. But yeah, so I think, you know, anywhere from like 400 upwards is great for a back-to-back lease. Management, you know, a couple of £100 probably, something like that is pretty reasonable. Yeah,
you've just had a deal accepted, haven't you? £1,000 a month.
Yeah.
And then you've got Ryan's deal, which is pretty exceptional.
Yeah. What? Which one? The 18. Well, he's sourcing one, and he's going to be getting a big fee from that, and then he's working on an 18-bed HMO.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't even remember how much he said he'd be making.
28k per year.
Yeah.
22,000 sourcing fee for the other one.
Yeah.
And then you've got Mick, who just introduced a provider to a landlord and got £5,000 fee with a repeat business clause. Because the landlord has 45 properties.
He's a portfolio landlord.
Yeah.
And
so just one deal
spaces.
pays back the mentorship.
Yeah, 100%.
And more.
Yeah.
It's mad.
Yeah.
We can talk about our students all day long and their results, because it varies so much. You know, someone might just get a management deal, which is 250, but that's solid, consistent profit.
So Chris has got, I think he's going to be closing out on his 7th deal, I think it is. All management deals, so he gets 250.
He's never met a provider, never met a landlord.
He's got 7 properties then, once he closes this last one, and he's only ever been to one of his properties once. And he's never met the other landlords. He's just done it all remotely.
Yeah, he lives in Scotland, he works a very intense job. It's crazy, he's built it all from his laptop. In less than a year. That's what's possible. So Dan, you started with me, what, 3 years ago? As a HMO student? So then you pivoted into social housing. Why?
Why did I pivot? I think because scaling the Rent2Rent HMO, I realised that there is a lot of hands-on, there is churn and stuff like that, it is finding tenants, and that process there's been a huge change in the market with HMO. I think we've all experienced that, not only because of the renters' rights that has now come out, but even previously, like they were stopping a lot of international student travel and stuff like that, and making it more difficult for international students, and it just really dried up the market, and I found it was difficult to start filling rooms. And you know, we had quite basic rooms, and we were seeing all these higher end rooms getting released and stuff like that, and it just soaked up the demand really. really, and I just thought, one, it's more hands-on, and then it's getting more difficult to fill the rooms. It's not as predictable as I would have liked it to be, and social housing is just, it is just predictable, you know. It's, you know, there is the legwork of that extra part of obviously finding the tenant first, finding the provider, but once you actually set the deals up, they just run, and it's just, you know, you're essentially completely hands-off. Yes, you have to make a few calls every now and again, check in, do inspections, and, you know, if there's a maintenance issue that you need to report back to the landlord, then yeah, you have to deal with those sorts of things. But, you know, once the deal's done, it's done, and you know that that's coming in every single month. So it's just...
Yeah, and you're working, your tenant is a business.
Exactly.
Not covered by tenant rights.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I completely understand the pivot. And HMO is a very unstable market. You know, it's been a steady ship for 17 years.
Yeah.
Thank you, government, for ruining that.
Yeah.
Absolutely destroyed the HMO market.
Yeah.
You know, I had a Zoom with the landlord that I work with, and I've previously rented HMOs from him, but now he's going into self-managing. A portfolio owner self-managing his own properties because he can't afford the drop. He can't afford to pay an estate agent. He can't afford to accept my offer because I now need to offer what I was paying him 5 years ago. Yeah. So now landlords are forced to self-manage. And you're going to get people in the comments go, oh no. And it's like, well, no. You know, he's added a lot of value to the marketplace. He's bought these rundown properties, spruced them up to then rent to working professionals.
Yeah.
And why not make it passive and rent to someone like me and make a bit of margin in between? But now the government have absolutely destroyed that. Section 21 gone. International students stopped from coming to the UK. They know what they're doing. There's a massive housing crisis coming very soon because of the HMO market.
So it's like if HMO was good now, would be the perfect opportunity because there's just so many sat empty on the market.
Yeah.
And landlords are just dying to have that hands off.
Yeah, I think HMO to SA is a very good strategy now.
Yeah, it's an intriguing one, that is.
But it's got to be in the right area.
Yeah. And then it's just, I don't see how that would work though, because it's like, you've got people that are living there long term, and then you've got people just coming in and out of the house.
Just specifically
just purely,
Airbnb.
okay.
Rent the rooms purely Airbnb.
Room by the room, okay.
Room by room.
Yeah.
No onboarding tenants.
Yeah.
But you have to get the rent right. You can't pay the going rate.
No.
You need to pay a really good rate.
Yeah.
Conservative enough.
Yeah.
Because it's a new niche.
Yeah.
Not, you know, the majority of the market isn't doing it.
I can imagine that would work better on like high-end HMOs, right, where you've got like tea stations and en-suites and stuff like that.
Some contractors, it depends on contractors. A lot of contractors travelling around the UK, you know, they're paid, they're given, they're allocated £40 per night.
Okay.
So if they can find somewhere for £20 per night and they just pocket the rest.
Yeah, that makes sense.
No.
Yeah. We actually are purely social housing now, so we handed back 3 HMOs this year.
Yeah.
So the 6-bed in Nottingham, 4-bed in Gloucester, and then another 4-bed in Gloucester. We handed them all back just before the renters' rights come into effect. Yeah. So they're gone.
Yeah, I mean, I always say to everybody, never try and plan 3 years ahead.
Yeah.
Your journey would change drastically. You didn't know you were going to go into this niche.
No.
And now the new niche we're in, you're a partner on the Rise Up social housing program.
Yeah.
We're in business together buying established businesses.
Yeah.
If I said that to you, 3.5, coming up 4 years ago, Dan, in 4 years' time, mate, you're going to be doing this, this, and this.
Never would have, wasn't even on the radar.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
You just wanted to get out of your job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So for those of you that are watching it, just going on from what I just said, Dan joined this many years ago and now he's doing this. Don't try and figure out if this is the route you ultimately want to take. It's like, is this the right route to escape your job? And I'd say it's one of the easiest things to learn. You know, you can learn Amazon FBA. That's definitely saturated. I speak to a lot of you guys on Zooms that you've done that and now you're leaving it because it's saturated. Drop shipping, crypto trading. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
Books and books and books to read on reading the market, the candles, the charts, this and charts that. This is just speak to a provider or a landlord.
Yeah.
Listen to their problems and solve their solution. That's it.
Yeah.
It's a people person game.
It is definitely, if you've got strong people skills, that is a massive plus.
Definitely.
Yeah, that will definitely help you, 100%.
Yeah, if you go into the phone calls with dead energy, like, we're looking for 3 bed, you don't even try it. Yeah. You've got to have energy about you, but you can learn that as well. You can grow into it.
You've not got to be over the top. You've not got to be extroverted at all. Like, I'm not.
We're just normal guys.
Yeah, exactly. But you've just got to be polite, have general manners, just be interested in other people, like ask questions. Listen more than you talk. Those sorts of things, right? It's just general people skills. Is definitely going to help you in this game.
we're a problem solver. So yeah, I'd say it is right for you, but that's something you guys can answer. But if you want to see how Dan's journey progressed from start to finish, well, I say finish, to where you currently are, then go and watch this video right here.